An investigation's underway in Japan into why more than 600 children suffered from convulsions and vomiting after watching a television cartoon program. It's thought that bright flashing lights in the cartoon, Pocket Monsters, were to blame. Andrew Burrows reports.
Almost every Japanese child knows Pocket Monsters and its star Pakucho. Almost every Japanese child knows Pocket Monsters and its star Pakucho. Who's
that Pokemon?
It's Pakucho.
It doesn't feel like all that long ago we were looking at the one that started it all. But it's worth remembering that Pokemon came to Western shores much later than in Japan. Pokemon Red and Blue was released in 1996 in Japan, but it was almost the year 2000 by the time the rest of the world discovered the joy of capturing fantasy monsters and abusing them in elaborate fighting tournaments. So it seems to us like there's been a whirlwind of constant releases from that through Gold and Silver, then Crystal, then Ruby and Sapphire on the new Game Boy Advance.
Kyogre.
Shroomish.
Why not?
Kecleon!
Latias. Corphish. Pikachu.
Pakucho.
We arrive at Pokemon Colosseum barely 3 years since we were introduced to the franchise. But the frequency of those releases and the sheer volume of Pokemon content does mean that it still represents a significant departure from the expected formula. First of all, the very concept of a full story-driven RPG Pokemon game on home console was strange, having been an entirely handheld affair to this point. Aside from Pokemon Stadium, which was really just a fancy visualizer for the Game Boy games. So it's easy to see why the hype was so huge for this one. A full-on Pokemon adventure with, presumably, a whole new collection of monsters, a new world, and GameCube graphics. It was an easy sell. But this isn't exactly that. The first impressions are incredible, as you do indeed see the world of Pokemon brought to life in stunning, well, if not stunning graphics, it was 3D at least. It was a thrill for longtime fans of the series to see the creatures actually move around in battle, even if they don't get into close proximity and actually strike each other. Some of the animations for the different moves are really cool, especially in the late game when you get to see some of the more powerful environmental effects. However, outside of the battles themselves, perhaps the core mechanic has been removed. Namely, you can no longer capture wild Pokemon.
What?
That's right, in fact, you don't even encounter wild Pokemon at all. All battling is done with other trainers, and you collect Pokemon by stealing theirs. But you can't just take any ones you want. There are specific shadow Pokemon who've been experimented on to close their hearts, and that makes stealing them morally okay because they've been mistreated. So those ones are the only ones you can take. I mean, you can take them. Whether or not you do seems largely down to a fuck you algorithm powered by some bullshit RNG.
Absolute 1,000,000% bullshit. Bullshit.
They show up in specific battles, and there are only 48 of them in total, which is a massive decrease from the amount of the little blighters you could collect in previous titles. It also means the process is a far more linear affair, with different towns simply being dots on a map that you fast travel to. And it doesn't really feel like you get to customize your own squad the way that you used to, given all those restrictions. I like to think it was my own genius that discovered the fact that Miss Drevis is not just the best Pokemon, but perhaps the most game-breakingly dominant Pokemon in the entire series. What with confusing all her enemies right out the gate, and then having a bunch of attacks simply pass right through her. not to mention an absolutely stunning head of hair for a ghost. But if you played this, you probably encountered and captured her around the same time and had a very similar experience, so arguably it's a bit less personal. That said, this is probably better thought of as a more traditional RPG adventure, with the style and story being considerably darker and frankly cooler than the handheld offerings. You're not some dumb innocent kid leaving home for the first time anymore, but a cool, no-nonsense, edgy teen. I mean, look at this guy. He would definitely be willing to be slightly too loud in a shopping centre and absolutely ruin your day by making things a bit awkward, right? Yeah, girls love a bad boy. You were part of a tough guy gang of Pokemon thieves, but now you've gone rogue and are looking to tear down the organisation through lots and lots and lots of cockfighting. You've even got an absolutely fucking mental motorbike. Look at that. There's no way that thing's electric. Furthering the feeling of streamlining the experience, you start off with level 26 Pokemon, so you're past all the early game drudgery of finding rats and pigeons to batter to grind up your stats. You can get straight into the adventuring. I know this might sound like the game is really lacking so much of the depth offered by other titles in the series, but honestly it doesn't feel that way when you're playing. The towns and the dungeons are well designed and exciting to explore. The story, while fairly basic, is much more interesting and engaging than the usual repetitive coming-of-age fare. And of course, the meat, the Pokemon battles, are just as entertaining as ever, this time being in the form of 2-on-2 fights that add a layer of complexity to the strategy when selecting which Pokemon to team up against the opposition. Also, even with the smaller number of Pokemon, you still get attached to your favourites and end up having a decently personalised squad that suits your playstyle. You don't really need to choose from 150 of them, surely around 50 is enough. So this was a triumph for me and occupied a great many Saturday mornings, the best time to play things like this by the way. It's still probably my favourite Pokemon, but maybe not for you if you're a purist. May Pikachu strike me down.
Pakucho.